Hi, I'm Kim. This is Ryan Gellert, the CEO of Patagonia, and we are so excited to have him here with us today. It's one of the most unique companies on the planet, and we're just psyched. Ryan, the first time we spoke in depth was back in November 2020.
2020, yeah.
Things were different back then.
That's my memory, yeah.
So I want to. We wrote a story, and I want to reference a passage from that, which I got from that interview, right? That weekend in November, your phone blew up with texts from friends and colleagues across North America and Europe as you watched President-elect Joe Biden's victory speech from your home in the Netherlands. You felt a wave of relief, then you sat down to compose a message to your employees. You told them to celebrate. Quote, "It was like taking a lot of bricks out of your backpack as you're trudging uphill." Those bricks are back now, aren't they?
Yeah, and they're bigger than ever.
So how are you feeling?
It's interesting. You know, I'm not sure I've read that piece in the 5 years since it came out, and I think I'm feeling, it's really interesting being up here on the heels of the last presentation. I think they set the tone for how I'm feeling. I think that polarization at that time that you're describing was a real problem, particularly here in America. I think it's exponentially worse now. I never imagined the attacks on science, the very facts of this country's been built on people having opinions and arguing vehemently around those opinions. But the one thing I think we generally agreed on were the facts, and the efforts to defund and to attack scientists and science is just something I never would have imagined. Then finally, what I'd say, I remember it was actually around that time I listened to Madeleine Albright do a conversation in the Netherlands, and it was done virtually because of COVID. And the first question the interviewer asked her was, America recently elected its first black president, and then there's Donald Trump. In this next election, he said, which is the real America? And Madeleine Albright, I think, was really taken back by that question. And after about 15 seconds of silence, she said, I think we'll see in this next election. I thought we did, and here we are.
So it's been 5 months-ish since Trump came back to the White House. Have you interacted with the administration at all in that time yet?
No, I would say not directly at all in 5 months. We had a really good working relationship with the last administration. This one, that's not been the case so far, probably not going to be the case.
Probably not?
Yeah. Seems unlikely.
Would you like to open a conversation with them?
I think we would, it's funny, I think there's often this perception that we are in some way like an extension of the Democratic Party, which nothing could be further from the truth. We've had battles with the Biden administration, we've had battles with the Obama administration, you can fill in the name as far back as you want to go with Democratic presidents. I think that what's really important to us is we will work with anybody that is deeply committed to protecting clean air, clean water, clean soil. I haven't seen a lot of indications that that's the case from any part of this administration, but I hope to be proven wrong. And perhaps public lands, there will be a little bit of an opportunity, we'll see.
And what are some of your priorities as you determine where to press the administration on different things?
I think public lands is it, and probably it may prove to be the only area where there's some common ground. And my gut tells me it's not, because the administration is very progressive on protecting public lands. Certainly there's a lot of voices in the Senate and in the House that have the opposite posture. But what I do believe works with this administration is public pressure. And through the reconciliation process, it was tremendous public pressure in support of protecting public lands. It was from across political ideologies, it was from across communities, outdoor-oriented people, hunters, fishers, otherwise, and it was around the country. So I think that was very successful for a minute in doing that and avoiding a sell-off of public lands as a way to raise money. The concerns that I have, that list is endlessly long around the forced lease sales in the Gulf of Mexico and up in Alaska, both on land and in the oceans.
So one thing that happened in that 5-year span was back in 2022, your founder, Yvon Chouinard, decided to change the ownership structure of Patagonia. Can you take us through what that structure is now?
Yeah, I give you a little bit of background though, because I think it makes a lot of, it sort of impacts the story. So Yvon has started Patagonia in 1973. He's always been the sole owner. He and the family have always been sole owners of the company. And he's looked a number of times at, okay, what do I do with this thing? I never set out to be a businessman. I don't really value money in particular. And I want to use these resources that I have, the business, any money that it kicks off and otherwise, to fight the climate and ecological crisis. What's the best way of doing that? And his mentor was a guy named Doug Tompkins. And Doug made money he started with his wife at the time, a company called Esprit, sold the company, moved down to South America, and became, with his second wife, Chris Tompkins, the first CEO of Patagonia. The two of them became the largest conservationists in the history of conservation by building national parks across Chile and Argentina. And so that was sort of the big idea that Yvon used as the straw man for, unless I got a better idea, I'll do something like that. So there were a number of points along the way where he thought about selling the company and doing that. But he always believed, unlike Esprit, that Patagonia as a functioning business, modeling a more responsible version of business, could have an outsized impact above and beyond just the money that he could give away. And so in 2021, in the depths of COVID, I remember, as you described, I was living in Europe and overseeing the Patagonia business in that part of the world. Finally made the move over in January. I think it was probably February, sitting on the back porch at Yvon's house with he and his wife, Melinda, and we were talking about a bunch of things. In essence, how the hell are we going to make payroll and how are we going to keep these things going? And he said, oh yeah, one other quick thing. I need you to figure out the future of the company.
And you got this, no problem.
I'm just going to pretend that conversation never happened and keep moving. And I came back a week later, and in classic Yvon form, he was like, yeah, but what about the future of the company? What's the ownership going to look like? And I said, Yvon, God, I got my hands more than full. Could you give me a minute on this? And he said, I swear if you don't get on this, I'm going to go down to the grocery store, buy one of those billionaires magazines and start cold calling people, so you better get on it. So we went through this process that probably lasted, it was certainly a solid year, maybe closer to 18 months, just meeting with the family, a really small group, and just kind of understanding what are all the things that you want through any kind of new structure? What are all the things that you would not accept? Let's get them all on a board and let's start really winnowing it down to like 2 or 3 things, because that's all we're going to be able to do. And when we did that, the 2 things that were most important to the entire family were cash flow the environment in much bigger ways right now and ensure that Patagonia can continue to exist as a business in the world, run according to the values that we've imbued it with. And those 2 things, as I think you can imagine, are in conflict. And so we looked at selling the company, taking it public, doing all those things that you would expect, and none of them sort of balance that tension. And so what we put in place, to your question now, was a structure that's fairly novel, took parts kind of off the shelf within the system, and we have a perpetual purpose trust, which sits above the board of directors and makes sure that people like me don't screw this thing up and take it off the rails in a direction that the family is not comfortable with. That's one piece. The other piece is a series of 501c4s that we call the Holdfast Collective. And so at the end of each year, I look at how much money we've made as a business, what we need to reinvest in the business. Everything else goes to Holdfast, and they use that to cash flow environmental initiatives, projects, whether it be grassroots organizations or land acquisition.
They've Ryan-proofed it. You can't
They've Ryan-proofed it for now.
You're fine. Look, in what ways does this structure aid with Patagonia's priorities? Like, what does this allow you to do now that you weren't able to do before?
I think don't assume everybody in here is familiar with all the sort of streams of environmental philanthropy that we're involved in. But Yvon, in the mid-'80s, I think it was 1985, decided that no matter what we did in running the business was always going to have a negative impact on the planet. And so in addition to trying to find better ways to make product and scale those solutions, one of the things he was really deeply committed to was paying an earth tax. So initially it was 10% of profits or 1% of revenue, whatever was greater. In 2002, he co-founded an independent organization called 1% for the Planet. And that's 1% of revenue, whether we're making money or not, we give to small grassroots organizations around the world working to combat the climate and ecological crisis. And so through that, we have a pool of about $14, $15 million a year that we can put to work. With the restructure and the resources of Holdfast, it's all the excess profits. And so it allows us to make bigger moves more quickly than we were able to through 1%. We still pay 1% within the business. That's part of being a more responsible business. But now we have this second piece as well.
So one of your biggest battles, Patagonia's biggest battles with Trump 1.0 was, as you said, public lands. Mm-hmm. How have things evolved since then, and what are your strategies and tactics to protect public lands at this moment?
Well, I mean, I'd start with this, and it seems like such a basic concept, but I just think it's so unbelievably important as these issues are fought over generations. There's an old adage in conservation, which is conservationists have to win every day. Developers only have to win once. And so the conversation right now around public lands through this reconciliation process always starts in the same place. You could set your watch to how predictable the argument from that side is, which is, look how much we have. As if that's, size is relative. And what's really important is that we're holding the lines on protecting the public lands that are owned by all Americans and enjoyed by all Americans. And so, on the one hand, I'm really encouraged about the engagement through this reconciliation process that I mentioned before. And on the other hand, I see how much extractive industry is moving deeper and deeper into pristine areas, including the Western Arctic of Alaska. And so the answer to your question is we're going to continue to fight like hell to protect every inch of that we can.
It's interesting the kind of allies you get in this particular spanning across the political aisle, like, I don't know, Bass Pro Shops and things like that. Mm-hmm. These are also companies that support protecting public lands.
Absolutely. The hunting and fishing community has been incredibly active on this topic for a long time, but particularly in the last 45 days or so. I think they've been some of our biggest allies. We co-created with Conservation Alliance an organization of, it's now over 100 companies called Brands for Public Lands, and that's given sort of a platform for companies across the space to come together and pull in the same direction. So I get some hope from that, but again, the other part of this thing is just thinking about continuing to hold the lines on the protection in all the places. These cycles have a tendency to ebb and flow, and quietly and in the background is where some of the biggest damage happens.
And I hear that Patagonia and Holdfast have been actually buying up some land for large-scale conservation projects. Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I think it's important to acknowledge we actually don't own land, and so we put money behind acquisition, and then that land is given to different organizations, so we don't keep that land ourselves. We've been working on a project, the E.O. Wilson Between the Rivers project in Alabama, the Okefenokee Swamp in Georgia, Bristol Bay up in Alaska to prevent the Pebble Mine, the Vjosa River Wild National Park in Albania is a project that I've been very involved in for about a decade. Australia, we've got projects, Korea, Japan, around the world. But just looking at sensitive areas and unique opportunities where hopefully we can step in along with others and have an outsized impact.
I want to bring up something you said in the New York Times last year. You wrote a column called "The Climate Crisis is Bigger Than Any News Cycle," and talking about companies that are investing in sustainability, even if they're not saying it out loud anymore. Mm-hmm. And there's an interesting quote from you in here. Our business is not perfect either. Patagonia, which uses organic cotton and recycled materials across our products, supports factories that pays fair wages and encourages customers to buy fewer, better products, is part of the problem. We're trying to be a responsible company that sweats the details of every decision that we make, but every product we sell has a negative impact on the planet.
I gotta say, it sounds brilliant hearing it back from you.
No amount of water conservation and supply chain scrutinization will completely offset the damage that we're doing. Then why do it? Is there not a better way?
I don't think there is a better way. Let me come at it this way. We do the best we can. And I think that as we go, we learn. And the things that work well, we do more of them. And the things that don't work as well, we do less of them. I think organic cotton, the transition, which we made 30 years ago, is one of the best ideas we ever had. It's sobering to acknowledge that at the time we made the transition to organic cotton, less than 1% of the world's cotton was organically grown. Today, the notion of organic cotton is not as sort of quirky or misunderstood, and the reality, I believe, is still roughly 1% of cotton grown globally. So, I think it takes incredible commitment to try to change systems when there's so many vested interests in pushing from the other side. I think that few things beat protecting wild places and putting them in the hands of the people that'll be great stewards for them. So that's one of the critical pieces. I think as far as our own footprint and what is absolutely critical to the way that we operate is we think about our footprint, we invest in ways to lower it, we scale those solutions and open source them to our competitors, and then we work on the whether it's supporting grassroots activists or protecting land. I think some of the things that get me most excited right now within the business are decarbonizing our supply chain. Over 90% of our carbon footprint comes from the product that we make, not our facilities or moving it around the planet, but at the mill level, overwhelmingly. All of those mills are on the other side of the planet. None of those mills we own, and we're a small piece of the business for every one of them. And so we're pioneering with the mills, doing first it was engineering studies, now pilot programs, to work on carbon insetting and basically shifting them from coal to renewable energy where possible, and then using that to create a model that other companies can engage in. I think some of the other things are scaling product repair and also secondhand resale, selling products back to us selling those secondhand products to customers.
So you hit on something there I want to talk to you about. We had Jane Fonda in here last night, and she specifically called out Patagonia as a business that's leading the way, right? But there's various schools of thought here, like given the rest of corporate America, giving them like a template to do something. When you think about leadership, I've found that not many will follow, even if shown the way, right? Yeah. How do you, as the CEO of Patagonia, view your role in all this?
I think our role, mine included, is to model consistently a more responsible form of business. I think that and I'm going to be really cynical here, some of the least productive time I have invested is talking with leaders of other companies on different ways of doing things. Some of the most productive time I've invested is talking to employees of other companies and students in universities about different ways of doing things. So I think with leadership, often the cement's pretty dry. And I think with students and employees, it's very different. And so we'll continue to do what we do as well as we can do it, regardless of political cycles. And we will try to inspire customers, employees, and others that there are different options out there, however imperfect they may be.
Last thing, on the way out here, Patagonia still needs to sell shirts and jackets and make money.
Yeah.
In Trump's first term, sales grew every year until Patagonia surpassed $1 billion in revenue. Mm-hmm. Then the pandemic happened. How has your business been since then? And where are you at right now?
It has been a lot of hard work to grow very modestly since COVID. And part of that's by design. There's a number of decisions that we've made. One is opting out of any paid advertising on the Meta platforms, as an example, which is a really fertile ground to reach customers. So that's an example. Another is just making some different distribution choices. So some of it's intentional, some of it's just the landscape, but we're not a growth-oriented company, and you're absolutely right. We're unapologetically a for-profit business, and without a margin, there is no mission. So we try to do it both.